I'm Sheila. Welcome back to The Truth About Death and Dying. And joining me once again is Christine. Hi, Christine.
Hello, Sheila.
Welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you.
Today we're gonna this probably be a lot shorter than our last podcast that we did, but this one I wanted to talk about death doulas or end of life doulas. I guess it interchanging the name. Just I
Mhm.
guess it depends on what you prefer. Um, in an earlier podcast, I talked about some options for getting support in the home when you're, facing death, or not you're facing death, but the person you're caring for is facing death.
Mhm.
And it can be very overwhelming if you're the primary caregiver and you need a break and so on and so forth. So there are some options, and like you can go with a home care company that's like non-medical that will come in and help you do things. And then there are CNAs you could probably hire if you wanted to. And then there's the death doula.
Mhm.
And you are a certified death doula,
Yes, I am.
correct?
Yes.
And
Yes, I
I
am.
am
Yeah.
I am preparing to take the course to become a certified death doula myself.
Mhm.
Um, but what I would like to know is when someone asks you, what is a death doula? What does a death doula do? What is your typical response?
Just like a doula who helps someone give birth, helps bring life into this world, a death doula helps someone to die as they want to, according to their wishes. And you know, I tell people this often. You you labor to give birth. You labor to die. It really is life coming full circle. So a death doula is just someone who can walk alongside you, hold space with you, um, and help you plan, help you put things in order. Um, it's non-medical. I'll say that it's really a non-medical support person. It's somebody who I think the analogy to or comparison to birthing doula is really the best one. Like people create birthing plans and what they want the birth of their child to look like, and a death doula wants to encourage people to also think about what do they want their exit from this life to look like? What should it
That's
look
beautiful.
like?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great. That's a great description because people have asked me because they know that I'm interested in doing that. And ever since I went through this with my dad, I thought, and it sounds weird, but like I feel like I got a knack for it. Like I
Yeah.
feel like in a way, and I don't know. Well, we have talked a bit about how you came to be a hospice social worker, and but I feel like it is kind of a calling. Would you agree with that? That
I think so. I couldn't have done this when I was in my 20s. I don't think I would have been inspired to do this. I think
Mhm.
life experience created an opportunity, and I it's what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah,
It's what I see as my service, my ministry. Um, it, it's not a job and it's not work.
right.
It's service
Yeah,
really to other people. Yeah,
and it I imagine it feeds your soul a bit. Like,
it
and then,
does. Yeah,
yeah.
it
And
does.
it's funny because go ahead.
I was just going to say I think as in in the role of a death doula, you're doing a lot of one-on-one work with the person who's actually dying. Um, so I think it's more individually focused on that person in many ways, or that's how I see it. Whereas, and it's not exclusive to that person, but I think it's really someone who wants to have a death doula working with them
Hmm.
to design their death is someone who is open to talking about it. And so it's a different kind of environment, I think, a different
Right.
kind of relationship.
Like if my dad didn't have you as a social worker, I think a doula would have been great for him because I think he was
Oh,
so open about talking and
absolutely.
yeah.
150%. I could have, yeah, I could. and I think the work I did with him
I feel like
really,
you must
it,
walk a fine line sometimes with your doula training and then your social work
there's a lot of
experience.
overlap. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a lot of overlap there. You're just not a part as a doula. You're not a formal part of a hospice team. Um, you're
Like
kind
an
of
individual,
separate.
yeah, it's like a separate whole thing,
It's
right?
like a death therapist
Yes, there you go.
sometimes.
I like that. I like that. That's therapy. But I
Yeah.
think people could really, and I think it's something that is, I think I remember, I'm not sure if I read about it before you and I had a conversation when my dad was dying, because
Hmm.
and you were like, I'm a doula. And I said, oh, because I think I read something that somebody famous had gone through the death doula. And I'm like, what's a death doula? And so I looked it up. And then I think
Yeah.
you and I had a conversation. You were like, I am a death doula. And I'm like, oh, wow. So,
Yeah.
but it wasn't until just, and my dad's been gone, just over 3 years. And like now I feel like I can take that on. Like
Right.
I
Right.
immediately wanted to do it, but I was like, I'm not quite there yet. So I needed to do my own kind of
Right.
healing, I think, and so. But I'm so looking forward to doing this training and, seeing how I can apply it out in the
Yeah.
world and try to help somebody with that process.
And I had a gentleman. I haven't formalized, so to speak, my death doula practice. Um, just just because of life circumstances.
Right.
I still have a son at home, and I just haven't made that shift. But have done some individual death doula work um, with folks who then became hospice patients. So the my involvement with the family as a death doula preceded
Oh, okay.
working with these folks in a hospice setting. And then so there is some overlap between the social work piece and the death doula piece, um,
And uh,
but some differences too.
and I think it's important to get this information out to people because I think that, for one, if they've heard of it, because they hear, when typically when I say death doula, they're like, well, I know
Hmm.
what a birth doula is. They
Right.
like a lot of people know what a birth doula is, but they don't know what a death doula is.
Right.
And so I think it's important to get that information out and
Absolutely.
talk about like what that because it might benefit a lot of people that may not have thought about that. And
Hmm.
again, because when you come to that point where you've been given that terminal diagnosis, it's so overwhelming, and so much information comes at you that
Yeah.
it's tough sometimes to kind of sift through all that and figure out what is going to work best for
Right.
you or the person that you're caring for. So,
Right.
um, and and a doula, let's talk about the difference between, because it's non-medical, as you said. So
Right.
what would be the difference between like having a death doula come in and like a home health aide or a non-medical caregiver? Like where would you see the differences, or what can you speak to that?
I would say, number one, you don't have to be terminally ill to have a death doula. So there's no insurance doesn't pay you have no confines that are put into place because of insurance,
Right.
because it's not something it's that's there's no death doula insurance benefit that I've ever heard of. So
Yet. Yet, maybe.
yet
Maybe.
so at this point in time, there's no qualification, there's no standard for
Okay, so
when
it's
you
not
would
like
get
you've
a
been
death doula.
right. Gotcha. Because it is
So
like an independent contractor is
it
basically
is
so,
it,
and
it
depending on the
is
doula, what they may charge you.
exactly what they may charge you, what services they may
Right.
provide. There are some, yeah, I mean, it just could run the gamut
Yeah.
of services. Typically, a death doula is not doing personal care per se, like
Okay. Like
showering, bathing.
okay. Yeah.
That would that would be the difference. Death doulas that I'm aware of, they don't do that incontinence care, personal care. Um, that would be more of a home health aide or an agency that you hire, like a
Right.
private caregiver agency that comes in and provides that service. So you don't have to have a terminal diagnosis to be a death doula, or to have a death doula. There are a lot of people who recognize they're declining. They recognize, they're 92 years old, their life expectancy is probably not another 20 years.
Right.
And so they may start thinking about what is this going to look like? And how can I, in many cases, control it? How
Right.
can I create what it's going to look like? What do I need to put in place so that my kids don't have to worry about making arrangements or finding all my life insurance paperwork
Right.
or so it can be very practical too. It doesn't have to be just emotional working through fear or anger or guilt. It can be very practical. It can be, I want to
Writing
sit with
obituaries and
somebody.
they're still of sound mind.
Exactly. I want to
Yeah.
sit with somebody who's going to help me capture what my legacy is, like a
Right.
legacy project.
Yes.
um so every death doula may look a little bit different, but it's really like, okay, how do I want to sum up my life? What do I want that to look like?
And what a beautiful gift to give your family, really. You know
Oh,
what I mean?
absolutely.
Um, because the fact that my dad had, you know, paid for his funeral, more or
Mm-hmm.
less,
Mm-hmm.
set up the trust, did all that, picked out his headstone, picked out his burial plot, got everything done,
Mm-hmm.
was a huge gift because, like, we didn't have to think about it.
Right.
But people are so scared to, like, plan and talk about something that is going to happen eventually
Right.
that because I think people are afraid that it's like contagious or they're gonna die because they talk about it,
Right.
and so I think we need to like make talking about death just a more common thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because none of us escape it. And we need to talk about it.
Yeah,
We need to talk about it. And there there's some people think, I'm not going to be here, so I don't need to worry about it.
right. Yes,
You
you
all
do.
figure that
Yeah,
out,
you can take care of it. Yeah,
yeah. But there's something to be said for just having things lined up. And I would say too, um I got into hospice work because of my experience when with my mom dying. But my mother always, and my mother was a social worker and actually worked with the families of murder victims
oh,
in a court setting. And
okay.
so my mom always talked about death and dying. It was something we always talked about. She had everything written down. Her funeral was planned. Everything was written down, letters to each of us. And, that was 20 years before she died that
Wow.
she did that. And she would update it occasionally. Um, so I grew up just kind of talking about
Hmm.
death and dying. And I think she was motivated to have those things taken care of because she worked with families where a death was tragic and they had, they couldn't plan.
Right.
Um, so there's something to be said for just
Yeah.
having that all written down. And
Yeah. My
you know
mom and
to,
I just had a conversation about it recently about dying and we were talking about the podcast and everything and that you were going to come on with me and so and she said I my wish is to be cremated. That's what I prefer. She goes, but if when I die your brothers and you want to bury me, she goes, I don't care, bury me.
hmm
Like it's just it's an outline, I guess, or
it is.
just like this is kind of what I'd like, and that's kind of my thoughts too. Is like
Yeah.
I don't care, personally, I would like to have a green burial where I can just go back to the earth.
hmm
But if the people that have to deal with that at the end go, no, we want to put her in a casket, we want to bury her next to dad. Go
Right.
ahead, I don't care. I'm not going to be here. I don't care
Right.
anymore. But but I think it's important whether you're. And I think especially if you have children that
hmm
are going to have to deal with that you put some things in place so that they're just not wandering around like I don't even know I don't even know what phone call to make first.
And if
Who do
you
I
don't
call
have
first?
children, I mean, there are people who don't have family.
Yeah,
And as a social worker, then I'm charged with kind of putting all of those pieces together because there are people who have no one.
nobody. Yeah,
And so to have a conversation about a medical power of attorney, financial power of attorney, what are we doing
right.
at the end? Um, it is really important. Now, I have my whole funeral planned. My obituary is written.
Nice.
Um, I always say to my husband, just go to my funeral file on the computer and
It's all there.
it's all there. You'll know just what to do.
Nice. When I went through, I think it was when I went through hospice training, and um, I don't know if you know Wayne Melanson, but
Yeah, I
he
do. Yes.
yeah, who doesn't know Wayne in the Bangor area, right?
Yes.
If you're involved with hospice or Pathfinder or anything like that. And I think Wayne was heading it up, and so he made us all write our own obituaries.
Yes.
Oh, and mine was very elaborate. He goes, "Do you understand how much that's going to cost?" I
Yes.
said, I said, but I'm going to live to be 100. I said, so I'm going to have a lot to say, you know.
Yes.
And so,
Yeah.
we kind of tee hee and ha ha about it. But it's, but like in my dad's case, by the time I had the conversation, and we had kind of discussed it loosely prior to me asking him, but by the time I got to the point where I did say, like I think I recognized, like, oh, we're kind of getting down to the wire here.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Unfortunately, it was too late because
Mm-hmm.
I think his plan was to go into his office to be able to type it out, which is because who wants to handwrite anything, and if you don't have to,
Right.
especially when you have horrendous handwriting like myself. But I think my dad's original thought was he'd go in and he'd type it out,
Mm-hmm.
and I would edit it and do whatever, and then but by the time I asked him, he couldn't navigate in and out of the office anymore. So
Right.
he went, I'll handwrite it, and so he got to, like, I think high school graduation.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, oh, Dad, like I could have covered that probably on my own. It's all the
Right.
stuff after that, that I wanted to know.
Right.
And so, but he did, do his little part. But I kind of wish that we had done it sooner,
Right.
when he really could have, like, added the things that he wanted people to know about him. So we
Yeah.
had to wing it, and my mom was a great help, thankfully. And I think we even enlisted some help of maybe some of his military friends or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But so that was my bad because I didn't have that, and it wasn't like it was going to be a hard conversation, but I waited too long.
Well, and I always say to people to really not to put it off if you're thinking about it, address it. Always assume you have less time than you do.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Even for very practical things like life insurance.
Yeah,
If I would ask someone, do you have all your beneficiaries? Everything's organized, you know where the paperwork is. Oh, yeah, yep, she took care of that. Well, and then the person dies and they, in fact, had not identified a
right.
beneficiary.
Yeah,
They're just some of those practical things, I think. Someone who enlists the help of a death doula is clearly ready to talk about these things and address these things.
and
So,
get it in order.
yes,
Yeah,
yeah, and a death doula can help you to do that.
right. Yeah, my mother, because she has some pack rat ways, to put it nicely. She's not a hoarder, but she has some pack rat ways. I'm just going to say that, and I think she would agree with that. And so, she was like, "Well, all my stuff." I go, "Well, I wouldn't even know the first place to look for your things, Mom."
Hmm.
She's like, "Oh, all my insurance stuff is all together." I'm like, "But where do I find it? Where
Right.
is it in your house?" So it's important to know, and it's good that it's together, but
Yeah,
also it's important to let your family members know where to go and put their hands on it.
exactly.
So,
Exactly. The other thing that a death doula can do is, there are all of these practical tasks ahead of time. But, if it's important to someone to have a certain type of environment or have certain requests specific to pain management, um, you know, you can make all of those preferences known. You may want a certain type of music playing, or you don't want to be in a hospital gown or a Johnny. You want to be in your regular pajamas or your regular clothes. Things like that are really important to talk about.
yeah.
Um, I had a friend who died several years ago, and a few of us were with her when she died, and we all said, "Okay, when it's our turn, we don't want to be in a hospital gown. We want to just cut my favorite flannels or my favorite shirt
Right.
right up the
Put it
back
on
and
me.
just put it on me."
Yeah.
But things like that. Just, do you want candles burning? Do you want music playing? Who do you want there? Do you want to limit visits? Do
Right.
you it's an intense time. Some you have to, I think, again, making the comparison to when you have a baby, usually your circle is pretty small when you have a baby. You
Right.
just a few people you kind of allow in while you're just getting acclimated. And I think the same is true or can be true when it's time for someone to leave this planet. And maybe they don't want distant cousins to
Right. A house
show up
full.
and be
Yeah.
there and have a lot of chaos. They
Yeah.
might just want it quiet, and then it's okay for family to say now's not a good time.
Yeah.
Just kind of draw that circle close and
Yeah.
small, because there are a lot
It
of people
changes,
who
and it
show up.
changes too, because I remember with my
It
dad,
does.
it got to the point where he would just kind of hand me off his Leroy Jethro Gibbs cell phone, his flip phone. Um, and, he would just kind of make me field the calls, but like, his friends would want to visit, and, so and I felt kind of like, you got to go through me before you can see my dad, but that's what he wanted. He didn't want to have to be
Yes.
the bad guy and go, I don't want to see so and so, even though
Yeah.
I knew he loved them. But
Right.
he just got to the point where he was just done with
Right.
idle chit chat. And how
Right.
you doing, Jim? How you feeling, Jim? Like he didn't want to have to deal with that. And it
Right.
got to the point where in the last couple of weeks it was just really a small, like my brothers and I,
Yes.
immediate family, my nephew, my niece, and my mom, and so it was just very limited. The hospice team, but so I think even though it may start off as something, it does change with the way
It
they're feeling,
does. Right.
and all that. So you got to also read the room, and
Yeah.
I could read my dad's face pretty good when I could tell he was just checking out. Like, somebody would be visiting and they'd be blah 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 blah, and my dad was just like, I don't even care what you're
Right.
saying anymore.
Right.
Nothing
Right.
against you, but I just don't care anymore.
Right. And
So
sometimes there can be, not that anyone has um, less than optimum motives, but sometimes there can be a voyeuristic kind of nature to people wanting to be there or wanting to be a part of something happening.
yeah,
And so it's important for families to feel like they can put limits on that,
right,
he's not up to seeing people right now, but we'll let him know you came by, or
yes,
that you called. So I see that. I see that a lot where families are really working hard to care for someone, and it feels to them like there's not a lot of help around. Then things change and get real serious,
yeah,
and then there are like 30 people in the living room.
right,
And that's hard. That's sometimes really hard for families and really hard for caregivers.
yeah. We did pretty good. I think Dad got to the point where, like, people just knew if they wanted to
Yes.
check in, they needed to check in with me, and
Yes.
and and because he deemed me captain of the ship, I had to take that on, but I was glad to, because I was glad that he didn't have to worry about it. I take the phone
Right.
call and be like, not no, thank you, I'll let him know you're thinking of him, but he's not up for visits.
Right.
And
Right.
and I was glad that people, I think I even put out, maybe I can't remember what I did now, but I'm pretty sure I just kind of put out the word, like, don't just stop by.
Right.
Don't
Right.
just hop in. That's not where we're at now. So,
Yeah.
and it
Yeah.
is hard. It is, because I know people. They want, but it is weird. It's a weird time.
It
But
is. And some people want privacy, some people don't. So a death
yeah,
doula's role would be to clarify that, to be able to specify what's important to you at that time. What do you want? What do you not want?
right.
Um, and around even pain management, even though a death doula is not not administering medication
Right.
necessarily, but to know, okay, what's more important to you, being awake and alert, or being free of pain? Let me advocate for you in
Right.
that regard.
Yeah.
Let's address that.
That's good.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
And would you agree that people, like, kind of the final piece of control is who is there when they die?
I think so. Yeah, very much so. And I
Yeah.
think it's not always how families think it's going to go.
Yeah.
Um, and I remember when my mom was dying, I remember a hospice nurse saying, if she's still with us on Monday, she was in a hospice house, which we don't have in the Bangor area, which I would absolutely, that's like my dream to have a
Okay.
hospice house. So that's down the road, I think, a little bit. But so my mom was out of state. She was in a hospice house, and the nurse said if she's still with us on Monday, we're going to give her some space. And I thought, I got offended, kind of. I thought, she's my mom. I've been here for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
I don't want, I'm not going to give her space. I want to be here.
Right.
And Monday came, and the nurse said, why don't we just all step out and let's just give her a little space. So we did. And my dad was just kind of like kissing her and whatever, letting her know that he would be back in. And that was it. It was, everyone left the room. It was probably the first time my mother had been left alone with my father. And that was when she died.
So
And
she died with him right there with
only
her?
with my father.
Only with your dad?
Everyone else was
Yeah.
gone. And there were probably like 17 of us around. It was just this constant family. I talk about drawing the circle. It's
Yeah.
small, but we had so many people
Yeah.
coming and going, and probably a little chaotic. And no, it was just my dad. And I think it was, and I never felt like I missed anything. I felt like that's how it was
That's what she
supposed to
wanted.
be. That
Yeah.
was what
That's
she
what she wanted.
wanted. And
Nice.
so it is important for families, and I think a death doula can normalize that. To let's step away a little bit. Let's just give them some space. Some people don't want people staring at them, I think, when
Right.
they're
Yeah. When they're
taking
taking
their
that
last
last breath.
breath.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
because it'll happen a lot where a family member might go to the bathroom or something, and then, like, it's close, that their death is really imminent. And a family member may step out and go to the bathroom or something, and that's when the person dies, and
Yeah.
then the
They don't
family
want to
member
hear.
feels so guilty.
Yeah.
um, and sometimes I think it's just how it's meant
I
to
think,
be.
yeah, I think that's the last bit of control that a person has.
I think so.
If they're in that situation, obviously. I mean, if you're driving in a car and you, phew,
Well,
that's it.
right,
Maybe
right,
not so much, but yeah, in that
right.
situation. But yeah, well, I think that's great. thank you for joining me today to do this. I just wanted to
Yeah,
kind of just educate people a little bit about doulas, and I'll have more education that I can share once I go through my training coming up here
absolutely.
soon, and we'll talk more about it at another time, I hope. So, but thank
Okay.
you so much for joining me, Christine,
Thank you,
and
Sheila.
thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time. Yay!